What's up, beautiful people? I hope you've had a fantastic week. In today's video, I will be explaining how I scape, what I do, why I do it, but the main thing we're going to be going through today is the scale ratio or ratio. Now, there's a lot of really boring things I could go into, like the thirds rule or the golden rule. I won't bore you on this video with that one. I think I would need to make a dedicated video for that particular content. That would need to explain in a lot more depth than this video. On this video, I'll be pointing out predominantly where I went wrong for these scapes, so that way if I'm watching these or if I look at my scapes, I can take a step back afterwards and think I could have done this better, that better, and that's how you learn. Just the more you build, the better you get, and ultimately this is exactly what I'm doing it for. So hopefully you guys can learn from me and we're all learning at the same time together. You can clearly see the vision I had running through there. That is what I wanted to create, like a little walkway. Now, at first, this is going really well. You can see the scales on point there where I'm highlighting. Them tiny little pebbles look good, and the one at the bottom there with a slightly larger piece. What you can see here is a good scale ratio compared to that moss, and they do complement each other very, very well. What I should have done though is add all of those small pebbles leading up that pathway. But what I actually did do, and you will see it, is I added larger pebbles, or that larger pebble piece, kind of up the walkway, so it was almost like they were climbing across boulders if it was to be a walkway. That way it kind of ruined that walkway through the forest feel, which is something that obviously you can achieve quite easily. This scale, it's harder, but that's exactly where I went wrong. In my opinion, this would have looked much better with less of those pebbles, and that way, you know, it would have defined that walkway much better. I had like a little arch there as well, kind of leading up to the woods as if you were going through an archway. But that was it really. That was the first build that I'll be showing you today. Just a little tip about the cling film. It's actually a really good tip. Cling film the top and just poke a hole in. I hope you've liked the build though. On the next one, I will be showing the difference in scale and ratio and how you can use those to your advantage, which makes it look like a much bigger terrarium or jar or whatever setup you're using. Even if your tank's 4 foot, you could actually make it look like 6 foot if you make the right ratios and the scale ratios are on point. But a small tip from myself, you may use it, you may not, but I always start with a large hardscape first and make my way down. That includes any hardscape in terms of rocks, pieces of wood, moss, plants, to everything that I'm actually physically using. I always make sure I have one piece that stands out though out of the rest of them, but also more than one focal point within the actual setup itself. I'll be opting in for sand this time. The reason being is because this will definitely add a better scale, and after doing the first one, this one I know should be a lot better, or scale ratio should be better using sand as opposed to gravel and pebbles. I'll actually use a couple of pebbles or a few of them to define the sand or make the sand obviously look even smaller and the scape look larger. Every time you do add an element, make sure you always take a step back, have a look at it, see what you think yourself, and then start adding extra things in. I always just drop these in and then place them as I'm going, or knock them exactly where my mind was wanting them to be. You can clearly see though, I'm always using those odd numbers. It doesn't look good if things are symmetrical. Generally speaking, if things are symmetrical, it won't look natural. In nature, things are barely symmetrical. You may see the odd occasion, but a lot of the time, nothing is really that symmetrical in nature. So always use odd numbers if you can. As well as those 3 pebbles, I will be using 3 sticks. I think I actually ended up using 5 pebbles in the end, because as I put the moss in, it hid one, and I actually quite liked it where it was. It was a very discreet rock that would have been sat there or looked aged, so I ended up adding a couple more. Now this time I used a moss which was of a much smaller texture to this fern moss. That's why I was able to add the fern moss this time, because it gave a really nice touch to the actual cushion moss at the back. So this way, for me and to the eye, it looks much larger than it is. Not only that, but you'll see how I try and make this look aged. So when I'm adding the moss, I will add it, but I'll also push the branch out slightly so you can still see it, but it also looks like it's been stuck within that scape for a long time. You'll notice that a little bit later on as I move this tiny piece of wood here. On the left there, as it's sticking up. In nature, that wouldn't be like that. So these smaller details, just bear that in mind. That scale there is exactly what I want it to be in comparison with the soil, but that is completely out of place, and that just all I'm doing is going to push it into the moss to make it look like it's aged within it and it's a beach. So my vision was the film Madagascar, when they land on the beach.
Is here.
That was the vision anyway. Obviously I can't create that exactly, but I can try and get as close as possible by using something on such a small scale. But I am pretty happy with this. Overall, I do think it's really cool. I think ultimately for me though, I will be just getting this all finished off, showing you the next build, and again, a few things that went wrong on that build. This one for me went pretty smoothly. The first one, I do consider one of my worst, and then the last one, again, it was just an average build, so I'll explain where I went wrong on that one. The next thing is just making the lid for this, putting the cling film on and poking a few holes in. I actually ended up using a knife on this one, but I only use the knife normally to just cut the rest of the cling film that's around the sides, or cut the excess off, and you will see. But if you do have a pin, use a pin, don't use a knife. I ended up having to change this cling film a couple of days later because it was letting too much air out and it wasn't creating that water cycle within. The moss and everything was fine, but just if it's something that you don't want maintenance on, and you know you make these to sustain themselves, so it's pointless putting a hole in so big. Just get a pin and poke a couple of pinholes in there. I'll show you a photo in terms of what I mean from scale. This does look like a 2-litre jar, but obviously it's just a tiny yogurt pot. That's the perception that we're trying to create all the time. And let's be honest, if I told you this next clip is the same jar and I just wanted to restart it and make a new one, then would you believe me? And if you would, from that image, then that's exactly what we're doing, right? This is a 2-litre jar and the other one was a yogurt pot. I'm actually doing something a little bit different though. The drainage layer, I'm testing things out at the moment, and I'm going to give you guys an update on all my terrariums in the future, but it's probably going to be in a few months time, where I'll be showing different drainage layers, what happened, how they succeeded, if they did, and what I could have done better. Just like spilling that mud all over the worktops. Where I went right on this build was where I essentially used one large rock to be the main focal point of the build. But where I went wrong was I didn't use enough different scales or sizes of rock to actually define and make that one look larger. I ended up only using 2 different scales of rocks. That's where it went wrong. The moss, however, I did again only use 2 types of moss, but the moss would have been much better complemented if I used a better scale of rocks. The moss did complement the front to the back, hence why I was able to use fern moss again, because it looks like small patches of forestry and then in the background a massive forest among this mountain. Or that is the ultimate goal at least. But you'll see in the final result it does turn out to be okay. I do like the forestry at the back and those little patches of forest at the front. I just wish I used more or different types of scale of rock to then bring out the rest of the whole scape. But if you've liked the video, smash that like button. I will be doing a series on these, showing you in detail small parts of designing and building terrariums, paludariums, anything, just so you guys can get little hints and tips here and there. But as always from me, peace and love, I'm out.